Elvis Presley was only ever married once to Priscilla Presley, whom he met when she was only 14. Of all the women he loved throughout his life, however, only his affair with Ann-Margret Olsson, whom he once co-starred with, came close to rivaling his relationship with his beloved Priscilla in terms of how memorable it was in the public sphere. It gripped the world's imagination and kept us wondering about all of its juicy, albeit scandalous, details. Ann-Margret and Elvis shared a sizzling affair that turned into an enduring friendship and a deep level of mutual respect over time. Many suspected they might just be soulmates, Ann-Margret included. But their passionate romance led Priscilla to reconsider their life together, and reportedly, amid all that questioning, she broke a vase in a fit of fiery rage. Elvis met Ann-Margret on the set of Viva Las Vegas. Is it any wonder that Ann-Margret and Elvis fell so hard for each other? For one thing, she was often referred to by the media as a female incarnation of the King of Rock and Roll. Both stars were sex symbols in their own unique ways, were immensely talented in the music department, and possessed undeniable star power and magnetic charisma. They seemed perfectly suited for each other. When George Sidney, director of Viva Las Vegas, introduced the two on the set of his 1964 film, Elvis was already a big star, and Ann-Margret had then found the success she was looking for with movies like Bye Bye Birdie. In her 1994 memoir, My Story, Ann-Margret revealed that her affair with the man from Tupelo felt almost like an inevitability almost immediately after they met. She wrote that she and Elvis were indeed soulmates, at least in her eyes. They were both shy on the outside, but unbridled and wild within. They both lived their lives on the edge and could be equally prone to self-destruction in their own ways. Both had remained childlike and emotionally dependent despite their immense fame and meteoric rise to the top. Arguably, the two young stars might just have been a bit too similar for the king's tastes. He had very conservative, old-school ideas about things like marriage and gender roles, and because of this, he and Ann-Margret clashed on the set of Viva Las Vegas, after rumors started going around that he harbored professional jealousy towards her. She could be very assertive and was keenly focused on her career, and that wasn't exactly what he was looking for in a woman. Priscilla was furious over the affair. There was one pesky little problem with Elvis and Ann-Margret's relationship. The king was already engaged. Priscilla, who was 18 at the time, was still living at Graceland, eagerly awaiting their planned marriage. While Priscilla knew full well that Elvis had a bit of what could be called a wandering eye, she admitted to feeling especially threatened by her fiancé's relationship with Ann-Margret when she penned her 1985 memoir, Elvis and Me. In the book, she recalled a time she picked up a flower vase and threw it across the room when Elvis finally admitted his covert affair with his co-star. Elvis's youthful future bride was so inflamed over the affair that Elvis wondered if he should ship her back to Germany for a bit to give her the chance to cool down. But Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, stepped in to pressure him to marry Priscilla anyway. For her part, Ann-Margret was aware that her affair with Elvis couldn't possibly last due to his engagement. She wasn't confused about that. Elvis had always been honest with her about it, but it was still quite the confusing of situations that she had gotten herself into. With his wedding date coming up in 1967, Elvis and Ann-Margret continued to see each other periodically until they had dated for almost a year. Then, suddenly, both parties pumped the brakes. They both knew the relationship had run its course, and that Elvis had to fulfill his vow to marry Priscilla. Eventually, Elvis stopped returning Ann-Margret's phone calls. He married Priscilla in 1967, just as they had planned, shortly before his former lover walked down the aisle with her longtime fiancé as well. Elvis and Ann-Margret remained close friends. Even though Ann-Margret had been married to Roger Smith for 5 decades, she retained a deep level of affection for the legend of rock and roll who she once called her lover. She refused to ever say a negative word about him, even though she was initially heartbroken over the loss of their relationship. In a New York Times article published long after their split, Ann-Margret opened up about that burning question of whether she considered Elvis to be the love of her life. She started the interview by stating she had no intentions of hurting her husband. She went on to say that the man she'd been married to at that point for 30 years was the man that she knew she was going to marry by their 3rd date. Even so, Elvis and Ann-Margret remained close friends until his death. He even sent flowers to her before many of her performances, and she was one of the few stars to attend his funeral in 1977. But what about Priscilla? Remember how we mentioned earlier that Elvis had met her while she was just 14? Keep watching to see how all of that played out. And if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. Elvis and Priscilla's relationship. Elvis and Priscilla Presley met when he was 24 and she was 14. The age gap might seem pretty startling and perhaps disturbing to some of you by today's standards, but the difference wasn't a problem for Elvis, who earnestly thought he could mold Priscilla into his ideal partner. This plan was acceptable at first to Priscilla, but as she grew up, she began to want more control over her own life. Elvis was stationed in West Germany during his time in the Army. In 1959, Priscilla arrived in the country after the Air Force transferred her father there. One day, when she was out with her little brother, a service member approached her and asked if she'd like to join him and his wife to go meet Elvis. Priscilla's father gave the go-ahead to her after checking in with the service member's commanding officer. On a cool November night in 1959, Priscilla, donning a navy and white sailor outfit, visited Elvis's temporary abode in Bad Nauheim. Upon meeting the budding young star, Priscilla captured his attention. He still seemed interested even after she admitted she was only in the 9th grade. He proceeded to swoon her by playing several songs for her, including his hit, Are You Lonesome Tonight? But when she left that evening, she pretty much assumed it was a one-off thing. Elvis liked that Priscilla was young and inexperienced. Elvis saw a striking resemblance between Priscilla and his beloved mother Gladys, who had recently passed away. He reportedly told his buddy Rex Mansfield that Priscilla was just young enough and he could train her any way he wanted. Elvis was eager to see her again. The second time they linked up, he invited her to his bedroom where they shared a kiss. After going on 4 dates, her parents demanded they meet him. When that happened, Priscilla's father asked Elvis why he was interested in his teen daughter. Elvis replied by saying he was quite fond of her and she was a lot more mature than other people her age. He finished his pitch by adding that he enjoyed her company. Priscilla's parents were impressed enough by his words that they allowed their daughter to continue seeing Elvis. For the rest of the time he was stationed in Germany, Elvis was the center of Priscilla's world. While she continued to go to school, she fell behind. Her age meant the duo couldn't go out in public together, but they still saw each other as often as they could. The only thing that was left to do was consummate their relationship, which Priscilla was eager to. But Elvis told her she had to wait. At the time, she was too young for him to engage in that kind of thing. Elvis and Priscilla reunited 2 years after he was discharged. In March 1960, Elvis left Germany. Priscilla sent him many letters using bright pink envelopes to make them easy to locate among all his other fan mail. Her parents did, however, caution her that Elvis would probably forget her and their relationship was likely over. But then one fateful day, he called her. In 1962, he then convinced her parents to allow her to travel to LA to visit him. After she made her way out west, Elvis added a visit to Las Vegas in the trip's itinerary. During that trip, Priscilla started taking uppers and downers to keep up with Elvis's night owl schedule. She began wearing adult clothing that Elvis got for her, as well as wearing makeup, and she had her hair done to suit his tastes. She also visited Graceland for Christmas that year. After that, Elvis asked her to finish up schooling in Memphis. Her parents weren't thrilled, but she kept pressing them, while Elvis concurrently tried his best to convince him their daughter would be perfectly safe. He also told them he had intentions of marrying her. Her parents eventually agreed to the proposal and allowed her to move with him to Graceland. And that's how Priscilla and Elvis came to be an item. While their story began as a storybook romance, and they did eventually consummate their relationship after getting married in Vegas in 1967, they eventually separated and divorced in 1973. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think she was too young for him, or was it just a different time with its own set of norms? Let us know in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.